The turkey was perfectly golden, resting in the center of the mahogany table like a trophy, but the air in the dining room was so thick with tension you could cut it with a steak knife. I sat at the far end of the table, the spot usually reserved for children or unwanted guests, nursing a glass of tap water because Grace hadn't offered me wine. Laura, honestly, Grace sighed, flicking her perfectly manicured hand in my direction. The diamond on her finger caught the light from the chandelier, a chandelier my parents had paid for last Christmas. Did you have to park that thing in the driveway? The neighbors are going to think the cleaners have arrived. My mother, Carol, didn't even look up from carving the bird. Grace is right, honey. It's an eyesore. We're trying to maintain a certain standard here in Boston. Maybe next time park it down the block? I looked down at my plate, my knuckles turning white as I gripped my napkin. That thing was a 2012 Honda Civic that had carried me through 4 years of sleepless nights, cross-country moves, and the building of an empire they knew nothing about. But to them, it was just evidence of my failure. "It runs fine, Mom," I said, keeping my voice level. The old Laura would have apologized. The new Laura, the one who had a very interesting document folded inside her blazer pocket, just observed. I was collecting data. Every insult was another line item in the mental ledger I'd been keeping for a decade. "It sounds like a dying lawnmower," Grace laughed, looking around the table for approval. Her husband, Marcus, didn't laugh. He was staring into his wineglass with a look of desperation I'd seen on men facing bankruptcy court. He looked tired, defeated. "Well, not everyone can have a new Mercedes every 2 years like you, Grace," my father Richard chimed in, beaming at his golden child. "Grace has earned it. She's a specialist, a doctor." Technically, Grace was a dermatologist's assistant who hadn't worked full-time in 3 years, but in the Mitchell family mythology, she was practically a brain surgeon. "And what is it you doing now, Laura?" Grace asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to humiliate me in front of Marcus's wealthy parents who were seated opposite me. "Still playing with computers? Fixing Wi-Fi for grandmas?" "Something like that," I murmured. "It's a shame," Mom said, placing a slice of turkey on Grace's plate, the prime cut, moist and skinless. She dropped a dry, bony wing onto mine. "Laura had so much potential in high school, but she just lacks drive, you know? She's always been content with the bare minimum." The injustice burned in my throat, hotter than the over-peppered stuffing. The bare minimum? I had worked 100-hour weeks for 5 years. I had slept on a cot in a server room. I had built Secure Transact from a laptop in a basement into a cybersecurity giant. But they didn't see that. They saw a daughter wearing a generic suit, which I'd bought specifically for tonight, and driving a beater. "I'm happy with my life," I said, meeting my mother's gaze. "Happy being mediocre?" Grace sneered, taking a sip of her expensive Cabernet. "You know, Marcus and I were talking. If you need money for rent again, just ask. It's embarrassing to think of you living in some squalid apartment. We can write it off as charity, right, Marcus?" Marcus flinched. "Grace, drop it." "I'm just trying to help," she exclaimed, her eyes widening in mock innocence. "She's my little sister. It breaks my heart she's such a mess." I felt the familiar sting of tears pricking my eyes, but I forced them back. Not today. Today was different. Today, I wasn't the victim. I was the predator lying in wait. They thought I was the mouse. But they didn't realize they were all sitting in a trap I'd spent months constructing. I looked at my father. He was wearing a new watch, a Rolex. I knew for a fact he'd refinanced their home 3 months ago. I knew because I was the one holding the paper trail. They were bleeding money to keep up this facade for Grace, and they were treating me like the burden. "So," I said, my voice cutting through the clatter of silverware, "how is the house situation, Dad? Still paying off that second mortgage?" The table went silent. My father's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "That's private family business, Laura. Don't be rude." "I'm family," I reminded him. "You're a guest," Grace snapped, "and an ungrateful one. Eat your turkey and try not to ask for a loan before dessert." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach my eyes. I picked up my fork and took a bite of the dry turkey. It tasted like ash, but I chewed it slowly. "Don't worry, Grace," I said softly. "I won't be asking for a loan, but we definitely need to talk about money later." They didn't hear the threat in my voice. They only heard what they wanted to hear, that Laura was broke, Laura was desperate, and Laura was about to beg. To understand why I didn't flip the table right then and there, you have to understand where I came from. You have to understand that in the Mitchell household, there wasn't enough love for 2 children. There was only enough for Grace. My earliest memory isn't of a hug or a lullaby. It's of a birthday party, Grace's 7th birthday. My parents hired a pony, a real, live pony that trotted around our backyard. Grace wore a custom-made princess gown, pink and sequined, sparkling in the sun. There were 50 guests, a 3-tiered cake, and a clown making balloon animals. My birthday is 2 weeks after Grace's. That year, for my 4th birthday, I got a cupcake with a single candle stuck in it after dinner. My mom forgot to buy a present, so she wrapped up a box of markers she found in the junk drawer. Half of them were dried out. "It's practical," my dad had said, patting my head absently while watching Grace play with her new dollhouse. "Laura's not flashy like Grace. She doesn't need much." That became the narrative of my life. Laura doesn't need much. By the time we were teenagers, the disparity wasn't just painful, it was systematic. Grace was the golden child. She played the piano, badly, and my parents applauded like she was Mozart. I got straight A's in math and science, and they asked why I wasn't more social like my sister. The incident that truly hardened my heart happened when I was 16. It was prom season. Grace was a senior, I was a junior. My parents took Grace to a boutique in downtown Chicago. They spent $600 on a dress, money that was supposed to go toward fixing the leak in the roof. "She's the homecoming queen nominee, Laura," Mom explained, her eyes shining as she looked at Grace twirling in the silk chiffon. "This is a memory she'll have forever." 2 weeks later, I asked if I could get a dress. I had been asked by a boy I really liked, a quiet guy from my coding club. I found a dress at a thrift store for $40. It needed some mending, but it was a beautiful deep blue. "We're a bit tight this month, honey," Dad said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "Why don't you wear Grace's old dress from her sophomore year, the yellow one?" "The one with the stain on the front?" I asked, humiliated. "The one that's 2 sizes too big?" "You can pin it," Mom said dismissively. "Besides, nobody is really going to be looking at you, Laura. You're going there to have fun, not to be a show pony. Leave the shining to Grace. She's built for it." Leave the shining to Grace. I didn't go to prom. I told the boy I was sick. Instead, I stayed in my room and took apart my old desktop computer and put it back together, over and over again. I learned how the motherboard connected to the hard drive, how the RAM slotted in. I learned that machines were fair. If you input the right code, you got the right result. Machines didn't have favorites. Machines didn't care if you were the pretty sister or the smart one. That night, listening to the silence of the empty house while my parents were out taking pictures of Grace, I made a vow. I swore that one day I wouldn't just shine. I would burn so bright that they would have to shield their eyes to look at me. But the scars of childhood don't heal just because you get older. They just change shape. They turn into insecurity, into overworking, into a desperate need to prove your worth through tangible, undeniable success. I looked around my room, the walls bare, because Mom said decorating it was a waste since I'd be moving out eventually anyway. Grace's room down the hall was a shrine to her achievements. Participation trophies, ribbons, framed photos. My room was a storage unit for her cast-offs. I touched the cold metal of the computer case. This was my escape. While Grace was learning how to charm and manipulate, I was learning the language of the future. I didn't know it then, but that lonely Saturday night was the beginning of Secure Transact. It was the beginning of my $15 million fortune. But before the fortune, there had to be the escape. And that required a betrayal so deep, it nearly broke me completely. The turning point, the moment the sadness turned into cold, hard rage, came in the spring of my senior year. This is the part of the story where the injustice stopped being emotional neglect and became active sabotage. I had applied to universities in secret. My parents assumed I would go to the local community college, live at home, and continue to be the built-in babysitter/maid while Grace found herself at an expensive private college 3 states away. Grace had flunked out of her first major and was now switching to communications, which required another massive tuition check my parents couldn't afford. I checked the mailbox every day. I was waiting for a letter from MIT. I knew it was a long shot, but my SAT scores were perfect. My coding portfolio was advanced. I had a chance. But the letter never came. April turned to May. I assumed I had been rejected. I resigned myself to the community college plan, feeling a heavy gray fog settle over my future. Then, one Tuesday, I was looking for a stamp in my father's home office. He was old school. He kept everything in a locked filing cabinet, but he usually left the key in the top drawer of his desk. I found the key, opened the cabinet looking for the book of stamps, and saw a thick envelope stuffed in the back of the household bills folder. It had the MIT logo on it. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I pulled it out. The seal had been broken. It was opened. I pulled out the letter. Dear Laura Mitchell, we are pleased to inform you. A free ride. A free ride. I stared at the date. It had arrived 3 weeks ago. The deadline to accept was yesterday. The room spun. I felt bile rise in my throat. I fell into my father's leather chair, gasping for air. They hid it. They stole it. They stole my future. Why? I found the answer in the next folder, labeled Bank Loans. Inside were documents for a second mortgage on the house, and a letter from Grace's private college regarding a tuition payment plan. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. They couldn't afford for me to leave. If I left, they lost their free household labor. If I went to MIT, they might have to pay for living expenses or travel, money they had already earmarked for Grace's failing education. Or perhaps it was darker. Perhaps they just couldn't stand the idea of the invisible child outshining the golden girl. The front door opened. My parents were home. I sat there, the letter in my hand, listening to them laugh in the hallway. Grace wants to go to Cabo for spring break, Mom was saying. We should try to make it happen, Richard. She's been so stressed. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the sound of a heavy steel door slamming shut and locking forever. The crying stopped. The trembling stopped. A cold, icy clarity washed over me. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I realized that if I screamed, they would gaslight me. They would say they forgot to give it to me, or that they were protecting me from the pressure of a big school. They would twist it until I was the ungrateful one. I walked out of the office, put the key back, and took the letter. I went to my room and packed 2 bags, just clothes and my computer. I called the admissions office at MIT. I spoke to a dean. I begged. I explained the situation. Not the emotional abuse, but that my mail had been lost. Because of my high scores, they granted me a 24-hour extension. I left that night. I didn't leave a note. I waited until they were asleep, climbed out the window, and walked 3 miles to the Greyhound station. I sat on that bus as it pulled away from the suburbs of Chicago, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of light. I had $400 in my pocket from babysitting jobs. I had no winter coats suitable for Boston. I had no family anymore. I wasn't Laura the daughter. I was Laura the survivor. I took out a small notebook I carried with me. On the first page I wrote, "Debt to be repaid." I wasn't talking about money I owed them. I was talking about the karmic debt they had just incurred. I decided then that I would keep a record. Every slight, every stolen opportunity, every dollar they siphoned from my potential to feed Grace's ego, I would succeed. And I would do it so quietly, they wouldn't hear me coming until I owned the ground they stood on. Boston in winter is unforgiving, especially when you're poor. My freshman year wasn't the movie version of college life. There were no frat parties, no tailgates, no lazy Sunday brunches. There was just cold, hunger, and code. My scholarship covered tuition and dorms, but nothing else. No meal plan, no books, no living expenses. I got a job at the library shelving books at 6 a.m. I got a second job as a lab monitor at night, and on weekends, I fixed laptops for cash. I ate instant ramen until the sodium made my fingers swell. I stole toilet paper from the campus gym. I wore layers of sweaters because I couldn't afford a proper down coat. But I was free. It was during my sophomore year that I met Professor Lawrence Jenkins. He was a terrifying man, a legend in cryptography who failed 40% of his class every semester. He was the first adult male in my life who looked at me and didn't see a disappointment. One afternoon, he tossed my assignment back onto my desk. "This code is elegant," he grunted. "Inefficient in line 40, but elegant. You think like a thief, Mitchell. That's a compliment in security." He became my mentor. He gave me a paid research position that allowed me to quit the library job. He taught me that in the world of data, truth is binary. It's either a 0 or a 1. It's either safe or it's breached. While I was building my future, my family was busy trying to dismantle it from a distance. 6 months after I left, Grace called. It was the first time I'd heard her voice. "Mom's crying," she said, skipping the hello. "She says you abandoned us." "I'm in school, Grace." "Well, we need money," she said. "Dad's hours got cut, and I have expenses. Sorority dues are insane, Laura. You wouldn't understand." "I don't have money, Grace. I'm eating soup out of a styrofoam cup." "Don't lie. We know you got that scholarship. You probably get a stipend. You need to send $500. Mom needs medicine." I knew Mom didn't need medicine. Mom needed to pay the minimum balance on her credit card. But the guilt was a reflex programmed into me since birth. I almost said yes. Then I looked at my worn-out sneakers with the hole in the toe. I looked at the code on my screen, my work, my effort. I pressed the record button on my phone app. "Grace," I said clearly, "are you asking me to drop out of school to pay for your sorority dues?" "I'm asking you to help the family," she screamed. "You're so selfish. You always have been. Just send the money or don't bother coming home for Christmas." "Okay," I said. "I won't come home." I hung up. I saved the file. audio_grace_ask_01.mp3. That was the first receipt. Over the next 3 years, the calls continued. They ranged from guilt trips, "Dad is so depressed since you left," to threats, "We're going to take you off the health insurance." A bluff, since I was already off it. I recorded every single one. I saved every email where they asked for cash while simultaneously mocking my computer obsession. By my senior year, I had developed the prototype for what would become Secure Transact. It was a system for encrypting microtransactions for regional banks. Professor Jenkins saw it and introduced me to an angel investor. I remember graduating. I walked across the stage alone. No family cheering in the stands, just me and my diploma. I looked out at the sea of faces and felt a strange, hollow ache. But then Professor Jenkins found me afterward, shook my hand, and handed me a card. "You're going to be dangerous, Laura," he said. "Don't let them drag you back down." I moved to San Francisco the next day. I had $1,200 to my name and a billion-dollar idea. I was ready to starve again if I had to, because this time I wasn't starving for survival. I was starving for power. San Francisco chewed people up and spat them out, but I was already tough meat. I rented a closet-sized room in a house in the Mission District shared with 5 other developers. We lived on caffeine and ambition. I founded Secure Transact officially. My office was the kitchen table. My staff was me and Ryan, a brilliant but socially awkward front-end developer I met at a hackathon. For 2 years, I didn't exist as a human being. I was a machine. I worked 18-hour days. I pitched to investors who looked at a 24-year-old woman and asked where the technical co-founder was, assuming I was the marketing girl. I wrote the kernel, I would say, staring them dead in the eye. Ask me about the encryption protocols. The stress was agonizing. There was a month where we had $40 in the company bank account. I stopped paying my own rent to pay the server costs. I slept in my car for 3 weeks so Ryan could get his paycheck. During the lowest point, when a competitor tried to sue us over a patent troll claim, my mother called. "Laura, you need to come home," she demanded. "Mom, I'm working. I'm in the middle of a lawsuit. I might lose everything." "Oh, stop being dramatic with your little computer games," she scoffed. "Grace is having a crisis. Her fiancé broke up with her. She's devastated. She needs someone to organize her closet and cook for her while she recovers. You know she can't cook." I sat in my car, parked outside a Starbucks to steal their Wi-Fi, exhausted, hungry, and terrified of losing my company. "You want me to fly across the country to clean Grace's closet? She's your sister. God, you are so cold. It's like you don't have a heart. Just come for a week. Your job can wait. It's not like you're a doctor or a lawyer." I looked at the legal summons on my passenger seat. I looked at the text from Ryan saying the server was down again. "I can't, Mom." "Fine," she spat. "Don't expect an invite to the wedding when she finds someone better." She hung up. I put the phone down and screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw. Then I wiped my face, walked back into the Starbucks, and wrote the defense brief that would win us the lawsuit. That victory changed everything. We won. The competitor backed off. And a week later, we signed our first major enterprise client, First Western Bank. The money started trickling in. Then it poured. We moved into a real office. I hired Alicia, a shark of a COO. We grew from 2 employees to 50. But I kept my life a secret. To my family, I was still struggling. When I visited home for Christmas, rare, painful visits, I rented a cheap car, I wore old clothes, I listened to them brag about Grace's new job, which she quit 2 months later, and Marcus's promotion. I played the role they assigned me. The loser, the black sheep. Why? Because I knew them. I knew that if they smelled money, they would be on me like piranhas. They would guilt me, sue me, or emotionally blackmail me until they drained me dry. I needed to be bulletproof first. And then came the real crisis. Not business, personal. I hired a private investigator. It wasn't out of malice initially. I wanted to set up a trust fund for my parents for their retirement, anonymously. I wanted to be the bigger person. I wanted to make sure they were safe, even if they were cruel. But the report the PI sent me, it shattered any lingering illusion of dutiful daughter I had left. It was a PDF file, 50 pages long, filled with bank statements, credit checks, and public records. I sat in my corner office overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge and read the document that would turn my indifference into a war plan. The PI report lay on my glass desk like a bomb. Subject: Richard and Carol Mitchell / Grace Whittington. I opened the financial summary first. My parents claimed they were comfortable. They acted like aristocrats. The reality? They were drowning. They had $400,000 in credit card debt. They had taken out 3 equity lines of credit on the family home, the home my grandfather had built. Where did the money go? I turned the page to the transaction log. It was a horror show of enablement. Transfer to Grace Whittington, $15,000, wedding venue deposit. Transfer to Grace Whittington, $8,000, car repair. Transfer to Grace Whittington, $22,000, credit card payoff. Page after page. For 10 years, my parents had been liquidating their retirement and their home to fund Grace's lifestyle. Grace, who posted photos on Instagram of her luxury travels and boss babe life. It was all a lie. My parents were paying for her fake reality. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was a lien on the house. A predatory lending company called Quick Cash Holdings held the note on their latest mortgage. The interest rate was criminal. My parents were 3 months behind. Foreclosure was imminent. If they lost the house, they would have nowhere to go. And who would they come to? Me. They would show up at my doorstep, destitute, blaming the economy or bad luck, never admitting they spent their safety net on Grace's designer handbags. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. They mocked me for being cheap. They mocked my fake job. Meanwhile, I was the only person in the family who actually understood the value of $1. I called my lawyer, Sarah. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady, "I need you to set up an LLC. Name it Jupiter Holdings or something generic." "Done," she said. "What are we buying?" "Debt," I said. "I want to buy a specific distressed mortgage note from a company called Quick Cash Holdings." "You want to buy your parents' mortgage?" Sarah asked, pausing. "Laura, that's usually people just pay it off." "No," I said. "I don't want to pay it off. I want to own it. I want to be the bank. If they miss a payment, I want the legal right to foreclose." "That's ruthless," Sarah said. I could hear the smile in her voice. She knew my history. "It's insurance," I corrected. "And one more thing. I want a full investigative report on Grace's husband, Marcus. I have a feeling he doesn't know the extent of this." 2 weeks later, the paperwork was done. I, Laura Mitchell, through a shell company, owned the roof over my parents' heads. They received a notice that their mortgage had been sold to a new servicer. They didn't even blink. People's mortgages get sold all the time. They had no idea their failure daughter was now their landlord. Then came the investigation on Marcus Whittington. Decent guy, accountant, making good money but not fund Grace's lifestyle money. The report showed he had separate finances. He paid the mortgage on their house, the utilities, and the cars. He thought Grace's spending money came from her job. He didn't know she had quit 6 months ago. He didn't know my parents were funneling her $5,000 a month to keep up appearances. This was the leverage. This was the dynamite. I sat back in my chair. I had the power to destroy them. I could expose Grace to her husband. I could evict my parents. But I didn't. Not yet. I waited. I needed the perfect moment. I needed them to show their true colors one last time, so when I dropped the hammer, I wouldn't feel a shred of guilt. And then the universe delivered. Tech giant, one of the biggest companies in the world, made an offer to acquire Secure Transact. The number was $15 million. Cash. I signed the deal on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, the money hit my account. I stared at the screen. $15 million. On Thursday, Grace called. "Hey, Laura." Her voice was sugary sweet. "So, we're hosting Thanksgiving this year. You simply must come." Marcus's parents will be there, and it's going to be fabulous. I knew that tone. She wanted something. "I'm pretty busy, Grace." "Oh, come on. Don't be such a hermit. Besides, Mom said you're probably lonely. Come have a real meal. And bring that boyfriend of yours, the one you mentioned." I didn't have a boyfriend. I had made one up years ago to get them off my back. "He can't make it," I said. "Fine, just bring yourself. And try to dress nice. Marcus's mom is very particular." I hung up and looked at my bank balance. They wanted me there to play the prop, to be the before picture to Grace's after. "Okay," I whispered to the empty office. "I'll come." I went shopping. Not to Chanel or Gucci. I went to a discount store. I bought a polyester suit that fit poorly. I bought scuffed shoes. I wanted to look exactly like the failure they needed me to be. I was going into the lion's den, but this time I wasn't the lamb. I was the hunter wearing a lamb costume. The flight to Boston felt different this time. Usually I flew coach, crammed in the middle seat, dreading the landing. This time I could have chartered a private jet. I didn't, of course. I flew economy, but I bought the entire row so I could sleep. I spent the flight reviewing the receipts. The binder was in my carry-on. 1. The audio recordings. Years of insults and demands. 2. The financial forensics. Proof of my parents laundering their retirement to Grace. 3. The mortgage note. Proof that I owned their house. 4. The bank statement. My proof of funds. $15 million. I touched the binder like it was a holy text. This was my shield. When I landed, I rented the 2012 Honda Civic. The rental agent tried to upgrade me. "We have a nice BMW available?" "No," I said. "Give me the oldest dented thing you have on the lot." Driving to Grace's house in the suburbs was a surreal experience. I drove past the high school where I was ignored, past the mall where I couldn't afford a prom dress. Every corner held a ghost of my past humiliation. I pulled into Grace's driveway. It was a McMansion, too big for the lot, trying too hard to look like an estate. A leased Mercedes SUV sat in the driveway. I parked my Honda right behind it, making sure it blocked the view of the shiny grille. My mother opened the door before I even knocked. She didn't hug me. She looked at my suit, the polyester wrinkling at the elbows, and sighed. "Oh, Laura, is that what you're wearing?" "It's my best suit, Mom," I said, pitching my voice to sound slightly desperate. "Well, come in quickly. Don't let the neighbors see the car." I walked in. The house smelled of expensive candles and anxiety. Grace came bounding down the stairs. She looked stunning, I'll give her that. Hair perfectly blown out, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first car. "Laura," she gave me a fake air kiss, not touching her cheek to mine. "You look tired. Are you eating enough?" "Work is hard," I said vaguely. "I bet," she smirked. "Marcus is in the kitchen. Try not to bore him with computer talk, okay? He's been dealing with serious finance people all week." Serious finance people. I suppressed a laugh. If only she knew that the serious finance people Marcus dealt with were currently trying to get a meeting with me to manage my portfolio. I went into the kitchen. Marcus was there, mixing drinks. He looked aged. His eyes were tight. "Hey, Laura," he said, handing me a glass of cheap wine. I noticed he was drinking the good stuff. "Good to see you." "You too, Marcus. House looks great." "Yeah, well," he muttered, glancing at the ceiling. "Costs a fortune to heat, but Grace loves the high ceilings." I caught it, a crack in the armor. Marcus was stressed about money. "How's work?" I asked. Crazy. The market is volatile. Everyone is panicked. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. You doing okay? Grace said you were between projects. Grace says a lot of things, I said carefully. I'm doing fine, just closed a big chapter. Good for you, he said, but he wasn't listening. He was watching Grace enter the room. Then the doorbell rang. Marcus's parents, the Whittingtons, Gerald and Eleanor, old money, serious money. They walked in with the air of people who owned the place. Eleanor looked me up and down. And this must be the sister, she said, her voice dry. Grace talks about you. The technician? I work in tech, yes, I said. Fascinating, she said, turning away immediately. Dinner was served. We moved to the dining room. I took my seat at the end of the table. I felt the weight of the binder in my bag, resting against my leg under the table. The trap was set. All I needed was for them to spring it. All I needed was for them to push me 1 inch too far. And knowing my family, they wouldn't disappoint. We are back in the moment. The turkey is dry. The insults are flying. So, Grace continued, swirling her wine, we were thinking, Laura, since you're struggling, maybe you could move back in with Mom and Dad. They could use the help around the house, and you could save on rent. My mother nodded enthusiastically. It's a great idea. Your father's back is getting worse. We need someone to mow the lawn and handle the groceries. You could stay in your old room. My old room? The storage unit. They wanted to turn me into a live-in servant again, a 32-year-old woman scrubbing floors for room and board. I have an apartment in San Francisco, Mom, I said. A shoebox, probably, Dad grunted. San Francisco is a waste of money. Come home. Be useful for once. Be useful, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about usefulness, specifically financial usefulness. Grace rolled her eyes. Oh, God, here comes the beg. How much do you need? $500? $1,000? She reached into her purse, a Birkin, likely fake or bought on credit, and pulled out a checkbook. She slammed it onto the table. I'll write you a check right now, Laura, if you promise to stop embarrassing us with that car. Marcus put a hand on her arm. Grace, don't. No, Marcus, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of her acting like a victim. Here, she scribbled furiously. $500. Take it. Go get your hair done. Fix your life. She ripped the check out and slid it across the mahogany table. It fluttered and landed next to my plate. I looked at the check. Grace Whittington, $500. I looked at Marcus. He was pale. He knew they couldn't afford to throw $500 away. I looked at my parents. They were looking at Grace with adoration. You're so generous, sweetie, Mom said. I picked up the check. The paper felt flimsy. You know, I said, standing up slowly. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is very kind, Grace, but I think you need this more than I do. Excuse me? Grace laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. I mean, I said, reaching into my blazer pocket, I don't need $500. But according to the public records I pulled this morning, you're 3 months behind on your Audi payments. And Marcus, I turned to him, did you know Grace has a secret credit card with a $20,000 balance she's been hiding from you? The room went dead silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. What? Marcus whispered. You little bitch, Grace hissed, standing up. How dare you snooping? And Mom, Dad, I continued, ignoring her. I pulled the documents out of my pocket. I didn't need the binder for this. I had the summary sheets right here. You refinanced the house again in August, but you missed the October and November payments. You're facing foreclosure in 30 days. My father's face turned purple. That is a lie. That is private. It's public record, Dad, I said calmly. But here's the thing. The bank isn't going to foreclose on you. See? Mom said, trembling. I knew it was a mistake. No, I said. The bank isn't going to foreclose because the bank doesn't own the loan anymore. I looked around the table. I caught Marcus's eye. He looked like he was seeing me for the first time, not as the little sister, but as a threat. Who owns it? Grace demanded. What are you talking about? A holding company called Jupiter LLC bought the debt last week, I said. So? Grace spat. So? I took a sip of my water. I own Jupiter LLC. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Then Marcus's phone buzzed. It was a loud vibration against the wood table. He looked down at it automatically. It was a news alert. He subscribed to the TechCrunch Daily Digest. His eyes widened. His jaw literally dropped. He looked from his phone to me, then back to his phone. Oh my God, Marcus whispered. What? Grace snapped. What is it? Marcus held up the phone. On the screen was a picture. It was a picture of me, a professional headshot. The headline read, Secure Transact acquired by tech giant for $15 million. Founder Laura Mitchell exits. Marcus looked at me, his voice shaking. You're Laura Mitchell, the CEO of Secure Transact? I smiled, and this time it reached my eyes. Yes, I said. And Grace, you can keep your $500. I think you're going to need it for the eviction lawyers. The silence that followed my revelation was absolute. It was the kind of silence you usually only hear in movies right after a bomb goes off, that high-pitched ringing of shock before the screaming starts. Grace was the first to move. She reached out and snatched Marcus's phone from his hand. Her acrylic nails clicked frantically against the screen as she zoomed in, scrolling, trying to find the flaw, the joke, the gotcha moment. This is fake, she said, her voice trembling. She looked up at me, her eyes wild. You made this. You're good with computers, right? You photoshopped this. It's a website you built to trick us. It's TechCrunch, Grace, Marcus said, his voice flat. He sounded shell-shocked. It's the verified app. I refresh it every day. It's real. It can't be real. Grace screamed, slamming the phone down onto the table so hard the wine glasses rattled. She drives a 2012 Honda. Look at her suit. It's polyester. Millionaires don't wear polyester. I stayed seated. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I took a slow sip of my water, watching her unravel. This was the moment, the payoff. Wealth whispers, Grace, I said softly. Only debt screams, and you've been screaming for a long time. My father, Richard, was gripping the edge of the table. His face had gone from purple to a terrifying shade of gray. He looked at me, then at the foreclosure notice I had placed next to his plate, then back at me. The gears in his head were grinding, trying to reconcile the daughter he had dismissed as a failure with the woman who now held the deed to his house. 15 million? He croaked. Before taxes, I corrected. After taxes and paying out my early investors, I walked away with about 9, plus stock options. But yes, I have more liquid cash in my checking account right now than you have earned in your entire 40-year career as a teacher, Dad. It was cruel. It was necessary. But why? Mom whispered. Tears were streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of joy for her daughter's success. They were tears of fear. She was realizing the power dynamic had just flipped 180 degrees. Why didn't you tell us? We're family. Because if I told you, I said, leaning forward, you would have bled me dry, just like you did to yourselves, just like you're doing to Marcus. I turned to Marcus's parents, the Whittingtons. Eleanor and Gerald were sitting in stunned silence. They were old money. They understood what was happening instantly. They looked at Grace with a sudden, sharp disgust. They looked at their son with pity. "Marcus," I said, "check the date on the article." Marcus picked up his phone again. "Last Tuesday." "Right, last Tuesday. That was the day Grace called me to invite me here. Do you want to know why she called?" "Don't you dare," Grace hissed. She lunged across the table, knocking over the gravy boat. Brown liquid pooled onto the expensive tablecloth. "Shut up! Shut up!" "She called because she needed money to cover a gambling debt," I lied. Well, it was a half lie. It was consumer debt, but to these people it was all the same vice. She thought if she got me here, she could bully me into giving her my rent money. She didn't know I had sold the company yet. She just wanted to squeeze the lemon one last time. "That's not true," Grace shrieked. She looked at Marcus, desperate. "Baby, she's lying. She's jealous. She's always been jealous of us." Marcus stood up. He was a tall man, usually stooped with the weight of carrying his wife's ego, but now he stood straight. He looked at the forensic accounting document I had slid toward him earlier. "Grace," he said. His voice was quiet, deadly. "Is this true? The credit card ending in 4590? The one with the $20,000 balance?" I needed things for the house," Grace stammered. "For your image, Marcus, to help you get promoted." "I checked that account statement," I interjected coolly. "Most of the charges are at luxury spas, liquor stores, and a boutique called Envy. None of that helps Marcus." Grace looked cornered. She looked at Mom and Dad for help. "Do something! She's ruining Thanksgiving! She's ruining my marriage!" My mother, true to form, tried to pivot. She wiped her eyes and put on a shaky smile, turning to me. "Laura, honey, let's all calm down. This is wonderful news, really. We're all just in shock. We're so proud of you. My goodness, a CEO? I always told your father you had a special mind." The audacity made me want to laugh. "You told Father I was going nowhere with my video games. You told me to my face that I should be more like Grace." "We were just pushing you," Dad chimed in, finding his voice. "It was tough love. And look, it worked. You're successful. We did our job." "You did nothing," I said, my voice turning to ice. "I built this in spite of you, not because of you. And now, let's talk about the house." I tapped the foreclosure document. "You have 30 days to vacate," I said. "Vacate?" Dad gasped. "This is our home. You can't. You own the company that bought the debt? That means you can stop it. You can forgive the loan." "I could," I agreed. "I could write a check right now and pay off the whole house. It wouldn't even dent my interest earnings for the month." Hope flared in their eyes. They thought they had won. They thought the dutiful daughter programming would kick in. "But I won't," I said. The hope died instantly. I bought the debt to ensure that the asset, this house, wasn't lost to a stranger. But I didn't buy it to run a charity for people who have treated me like garbage for 30 years. "We are your parents," Mom screamed. "And I am your landlord," I replied, "and you are terrible tenants." It felt electric. Every nerve in my body was singing. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times in the shower, on my commute, in my lonely apartment. But the reality was so much sweeter. The look of absolute impotence on their faces was the balm for every birthday they missed, every graduation they skipped, every insult they hurled. Grace couldn't handle the shift in attention. For her entire life, the spotlight had been hers. If the room wasn't looking at her, she would set herself on fire to make them look. She stood up, shaking, her face a mask of ruined mascara and rage. "You think you're so special because you got lucky?" she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You're still a loser, Laura. You're socially awkward, you have no friends, you have no husband. Money doesn't change that. You're alone. At least I have love, At least I have a family. Do you? I asked calmly. I looked at Marcus. Marcus was flipping through the pages of the report I had given him. He wasn't looking at Grace. He was looking at a ledger of bank transfers from my parents to Grace. Richard, Marcus said, addressing my father without looking up, you told me you couldn't contribute to the wedding because your pension was cut. But here it says you wired Grace $15,000 the week before the wedding. My father stammered. We wanted to help her out. She wanted the upgrade on the flowers. I paid for the flowers, Marcus said, looking up. His eyes were red. I paid for the flowers, the venue, the catering. Grace told me the $15,000 was for, she said it was a student loan payoff. Grace doesn't have student loans, I said. Mom and Dad paid for her college in full by refinancing the house the first time. Marcus turned to Grace. Where is the money, Grace? The $15,000 from your dad, the $20,000 on the credit card, the $5,000 a month transfer shown here. Where is it? Grace looked like a trapped animal. I invested it in my brand. I'm an influencer, Marcus. You have to spend money to make money. You have 400 followers, I pointed out. Shut up. Grace grabbed a wine glass and threw it, not at me, but at the wall behind me. It shattered, spraying red wine over the beige wallpaper. Grace! Eleanor Whittington stood up. Her voice was sharp, the voice of a matriarch who tolerated no nonsense. Sit down and compose yourself. You are embarrassing my son. He's my husband, Grace yelled. Not for long, I suspect, Eleanor said coldly. She turned to me. Laura, dear, I apologize for this display. Clearly, we were misinformed about the quality of this family. Don't apologize, Eleanor, I said. Truth has a way of coming out eventually. It just usually requires a forensic accountant. She saw the ship sinking. She saw Grace losing Marcus, which meant losing the connection to the wealthy Whittingtons. She saw the house slipping away. She panicked. She ran around the table and tried to hug me. I stiffened, refusing to embrace her. She grabbed my hands, her palms sweaty and desperate. Laura, please, we can fix this. We can go to therapy. Yes, family therapy. We made mistakes, I admit it. We were hard on you. But it was only because we saw so much potential. We knew you could handle it. Grace is weak. You know that. She needs us. You never needed us because you were so strong. The classic abuser's defense. I hurt you because you could take it. I pulled my hands away as if she were contagious. I didn't need you, I repeated, my voice rising for the first time. I didn't need you when I was 4 years old and wanted a birthday cake. I didn't need you when I was 16 and wanted a prom dress. I didn't need you when I was eating instant noodles in a freezing dorm room because you stole my scholarship acceptance letter. The room gasped. That was a detail I hadn't revealed yet. You knew about that? Dad whispered. I found it, I said. I found the letter you hid. I found the tuition bills for Grace you paid with the money meant for my future. I didn't leave home because I was rebellious, Mom. I left because I realized you were parasites. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I connected it to the Bluetooth speaker on the sideboard, the one Grace used to play her dinner jazz playlist. And just so we are all clear on the love you have for me, I said, let's listen to a voicemail Mom left me 3 years ago when I was sleeping in my car trying to save my company. I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the dining room, loud and distorted. Laura, pick up the phone. Grace needs you to come home and clean the house for her. Honestly, it's not like you're doing anything important. Your little computer hobby is a joke. You're selfish and you're going to die alone because nobody loves a workaholic woman. Just come home and be useful for once. The recording ended. My mother's face was white. She couldn't deny it. It was her voice. Her cruelty, broadcast in high definition. Marcus looked at my mother with pure hatred. You told me Laura was too busy partying to come visit. You told me she didn't care about us. We were protecting her reputation, Dad tried to argue, but it was weak. No, I said. You were protecting your narrative. You needed me to be the villain so you didn't have to feel guilty about sacrificing me to the altar of Grace. Grace was sobbing now, loud, ugly sobs, her head on the table. But nobody was comforting her. Not Marcus, not her parents, not even my parents, who were too busy staring at the foreclosure notice. Here is the reality, I said, standing up and smoothing out my polyester suit. I own this house. I own the debt. And I have plenty of money to hire the best eviction lawyers in the state. So we are going to make a deal right now. Anything, Dad said quickly. Anything, Laura. Just don't kick us out. We're old. We have nowhere to go. I have terms, I said, and they are non-negotiable. I pulled a folded document from my inside pocket. My lawyer, Sarah, had drafted it yesterday. It was a standard lease agreement, but with an addendum that was purely my creation. Sit down, Dad, I commanded. He sat. He looked small. The arrogance that had defined him my entire life had evaporated, leaving behind a frightened old man. Condition 1, I began. You acknowledge that the deed to this house is now in the name of my holding company. You are tenants, nothing more. He nodded frantically. Condition 2, you will pay rent. The market rate for a 4-bedroom home in this school district is $3,500 a month. However, since you are on a fixed income, I will charge you $2,500. We can't afford that, Mom cried. Our pension is only $3,000. Then you better cut expenses, I said coldly. Maybe stop buying wine, maybe cancel the cable, or, better yet, I looked at Grace. Condition 3. I paused for effect. Condition 3 is that not a single cent of your money goes to Grace. Not for birthdays, not for Christmas, not for emergencies. If I see a single transfer from your accounts to hers, and I will see it because as your landlord and creditor, I will require quarterly financial audits, the lease is void and you will be evicted in 7 days. You can't do that. Grace screamed, lifting her head from the table. They're my parents. They can give me money if they want. Not if they want a roof over their heads, I said. You've been sucking them dry for decades, Grace. I'm actually saving them. I'm cutting off the leech. Marcus! Grace grabbed her husband's arm. Do something. Tell her she's crazy. Marcus looked at Grace's hand on his arm. He slowly peeled her fingers off, one by one. She's not crazy, Grace, Marcus said. His voice was heavy with sorrow. She's right. What? Grace whispered. Marcus reached into his pocket. I thought he was going to pull out his wallet. Instead, he pulled out his car keys. I'm done, Marcus said. Done with what? Grace asked. Us, Marcus said. I'm done being lied to. I'm done working 60 hours a week so you can pretend to be a socialite. I'm done with your family treating Laura like dirt while stealing from her. He looked at me. Laura, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know about the house, or the letter, or any of it. I know you didn't, Marcus, I said softly. You were just another mark to them. Marcus turned to his parents. Mom, Dad, can I stay with you guys for a while? Eleanor Whittington stood up, smoothing her skirt. She looked at Grace with a sneer that could strip paint. Of course, darling. The car is outside. Let's go. This house smells of failure. No, Grace wailed, grabbing Marcus's leg. You can't leave me. I have nothing. I have no money. I have no job. You have a degree in communications. Starbucks is hiring. Marcus shook her off. He walked over to me. He extended his hand. I'm sorry, Laura, he said, for everything I didn't see. I shook his hand. Thank you, Marcus. Take care of yourself. He walked out. His parents followed. The front door slammed shut, echoing through the house like a gunshot. Now it was just the four of us. Me, my parents, and Grace. Grace was on the floor, weeping hysterically. My parents were staring at the lease agreement. Sign it, I said, sliding a pen across the table. Laura, Dad started, his voice cracking. Can't we just talk? We love you. Sign it, I repeated, or I call the movers right now. With trembling hands, my father signed, then my mother. I picked up the document. I checked the signatures. Good, I said. Rent is due on the 1st. You can mail the check to my lawyer. Do not call me. Do not email me. If the house needs repairs, submit a ticket through the online portal like every other tenant. I picked up my bag. I felt lighter than air. The heavy burden of seeking their approval, of wanting their love, had vanished. I didn't need their love. I had my own respect. I walked to the door. Laura! Grace screamed from the floor. Where am I supposed to go? Marcus left me. You cut me off. What am I supposed to do? I stopped. I turned back one last time. I looked at my sister, the golden child, the princess, the idol. She looked pathetic. You're smart, Grace, I said, echoing the words they used to dismiss my struggles years ago. You'll figure it out. You have so much potential. I walked out into the cool November night air. My 2012 Honda Civic was waiting. It looked beautiful under the moonlight. I got in, started the engine. It made that rattling sound Grace hated, and drove away. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. There was nothing there I needed anymore. 7 months have passed since that dinner. My life is quiet now, but it's a good kind of quiet. It's the quiet of peace, not loneliness. I bought a house in San Francisco. It's not a mansion. It's a beautiful Victorian with a view of the bay. It has a garden where I grow tomatoes and a high-tech office where I manage my investments. I haven't spoken to my parents. My lawyer handles everything. The rent checks arrive on the 1st of every month, like clockwork. I heard from a neighbor that Dad went back to work as a substitute teacher to make the rent payments. Mom has started selling her collection of ceramic figurines on eBay. They are living the life they can afford, finally. Grace hit rock bottom. Without Marcus's income and my parents' subsidies, she had to face reality. She didn't get a job at Starbucks. She got a job as a receptionist at a dental office. It's honest work. I heard she had to move into a studio apartment. Marcus filed for divorce. He's traveling in Europe now. He sends me postcards sometimes. We're friends, 2 survivors of the same shipwreck. But the best part isn't the revenge. The best part is what I did with the anger. Last week, I stood on a stage at MIT, not as a student, but as a donor. I established the Lawrence Jenkins Scholarship for Underprivileged Tech Talent. It's a full-ride scholarship, tuition, room, board, and a living stipend for students who, like me, have the aptitude but lack the support system. I met the first recipient yesterday. His name is Jamal. He's 18, brilliant, and was working 2 jobs to help his mom pay rent. When I told him he didn't have to work anymore, that his only job was to code and learn, he cried. I hugged him. It was the hug I never got. You're going to be dangerous, Jamal, I told him, echoing Jenkins' words. Go change the world. Looking back, I realized that my family didn't break me. They forged me. They put me through the fire, and I came out steel. If you are listening to this and you feel like the invisible one, the scapegoat, the disappointment, I want you to know something. Their inability to see your value does not decrease your worth. You are not defined by the people who share your DNA. You are defined by what you build, but once you do, you will find that you have enough power to light up your own sky. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for walking this road with me, from the cold dorm room to the boardroom, from the kids' table to the head of the table. I'm Laura Mitchell, and I'm finally free.